hospitals, places of healing and hope. But when darkness falls, these sterile halls transform into something far more sinister. In the Philippines, medical facilities harbor more than just patients. Tonight, we bring you 5 disturbing encounters from Filipino healthcare workers and visitors who witness things that medical science cannot explain. Stories that remind us that in these corridors of healing, not everyone who walks the halls is alive. From abandoned wings to midnight shifts, these Reddit testimonies will make you question what really happens when the hospital lights grow dim. 5 Pinoy Scary Hospital Stories, Volume 1. I used to work at a hospital, and there was this one private room that everyone swore was cursed. The moment I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine. The air felt heavy, suffocating almost, like an invisible force was pressing down on me. Whenever we admitted an elderly patient to that room, even those who were relatively healthy, they would either suddenly develop a serious condition or, even worse, never make it out alive. It got to the point where we all avoided putting patients in there if we could. I remember one time we actually transferred a patient out of that cursed room to a different one. To our amazement, they ended up recovering and were eventually discharged. It was as if moving them had saved their life from whatever dark entity resided in that room. One of my co-workers, Sarah, had her own bone-chilling experience in there. She was administering an enema to a patient when she heard an eerie voice calling her from the bathroom.
Sarah.
The voice sent shivers through her body, but she tried to maintain her composure. Imagine the terror of trying to stay professional administering an enema while a malevolent ghost lurked nearby toying with your sanity. Sarah kept going, muttering reassurances to the patient in a shaky voice. When she later recounted the story to me, I couldn't help but nervously laugh a little. But deep down, I knew the sheer horror she must have felt in that moment. My brushes with the paranormal didn't end there. Back in college, during my duty at a different hospital, I learned that the ICU had its own sinister legend, a ghost child. The mere thought of it made my blood run cold. They said the spectral kid would visit the beds of patients who were on the brink of death like a morbid reaper. If he appeared by your bedside, it was an ominous sign that your time was running out. The staff would whisper about catching glimpses of him out of the corner of their eyes. It became this unspoken truth that everyone knew to be wary of. Every time I entered the ICU, my heart raced and my palms grew clammy, dreading the possibility of coming face to face with a ghost child. The knowledge that he could be lurking in the shadows waiting to herald someone's impending demise filled me with a deep sense of dread that clung to me long after I left the hospital walls behind. As I approached the ward with my classmates for an orientation, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that crept up my spine. The official name of the ward escaped my memory, but we all knew it by its infamous nickname, the Boracay Ward. The staff had warned us not to use that moniker, but it was hard to forget. As we drew closer, I noticed a group of naked men walking towards the glass window that separated us from them. Their faces were expressionless, void of any emotion as they waved at us or placed their palms against the cold surface. I tried to avert my gaze, but the scene before me was like a grotesque car wreck. I couldn't look away. Behind the men at the window, I spotted others in various states of disturbing behavior. Some were openly engaging in unsettling acts, while others lay sleeping on the bare floor. A few were laughing maniacally or grinning eerily, sending chills down my spine. But what truly horrified me were the two men restrained to chairs, their limbs bound tightly. I later learned that they had tried to eat their own flesh, driven by some inexplicable madness. As if the visual nightmare wasn't enough, an unsettling background music filled the air. It sounded like harmonic humming you might hear at a Buddhist temple. But in this context, it only amplified the sense of dread and despair that permeated the ward. Standing there witnessing the depths of human suffering and the terrifying reality of severe mental illness, I felt a profound sense of fear and helplessness wash over me. The scene before me was like a waking nightmare etched into my memory forever. It served as a stark reminder of the fragility of the human mind and the importance of compassion and understanding for those battling the demons of mental illness. I was a nurse in one of the tertiary hospitals here in Metro Manila, caring for sick babies for a living. One night, I got pulled out from my usual area and transferred temporarily to the medical surgical ward because someone didn't show up for work. It was around 1 a.m. when I was chatting with my college classmate Bea, who also worked in that hospital. Suddenly, we heard someone or something go, "Psst, psst." We immediately stopped our conversation, our hearts racing, and listened intently to see if there was anyone else around. Bea asked me if I heard it too, and I nodded, my skin crawling with fear. We checked all the rooms, but everyone was sleeping, including all the relatives. We tried to ignore it and shrug it off, but the unease lingered. Bea, perhaps out of shame because I wasn't from that area, asked me to take a nap since we had finished all our tasks. I tried to rest, but I felt uneasy, keeping one eye open as I lay there. At 3 a.m., it was time to give medications again, so I got up and started making my rounds. As I walked towards the last room in the corridor, I heard the psst, psst once more. This corridor had a way leading to the outpatient department, and without a second thought, I shamelessly ran from the corridor to the nurse's station. I told Bea that I had heard someone go psst, psst again. She looked at me, her face pale, and said, "Kahit kaninang natutulog ka pa, nangyayari yan. Nung nasa phone ako, tumatawag din yun pero hindi ko naman pinansin." The next day, I was back in my area being the senior nurse. When I went to the bathroom, I heard the familiar psst, psst. I didn't even get the chance to finish peeing. I just pulled up my underwear and ran towards my workmates, telling them about the previous night's events with Bea. One of my co-workers suggested that I try talking to whatever was following me. With my colleagues by my side, I mustered the courage to address the entity. To my surprise, the psst, psst stopped the following day. However, from time to time, something would still go psst, psst in that hospital. It was as if the entity had taken a liking to me, refusing to leave me alone. The thought of being followed by an unseen presence sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't help but wonder what it wanted from me. As a medicine nurse, I had my fair share of strange experiences, even though I never actually saw any ghosts. I just felt their presence. One particular incident still sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. We had 3 volunteer nurses whom I nicknamed the Tres Marias due to their short stature and the fact that they were all single. One day, they asked for the master key to prepare a private room for an incoming patient. They went to the room but soon returned visibly shaken. They repeatedly told me that the room was locked and none of the keys would work despite trying every single one on the set. Jokingly, I asked, "Kumatok ba kayo?" They insisted that I come and try it myself. I obliged and followed them to the room. As we stood in front of the door, I knocked 3 times and asked for permission to enter. Then I inserted the key and, to my surprise, it turned smoothly, unlocking the door. The moment the lock clicked, the girls behind me bolted down the hall, running back to the nurse's station. They swore that the door had been locked the entire time they were trying to open it. Another story. We used to have a room designated for terminally ill patients, and it seemed that the very patient assigned to that room would inevitably die. I worked there for 2 years, and we eventually stopped assigning patients to that particular room. There was nothing special about the room itself, but somehow, whenever the census was high and terminally ill patients were assigned there, they would pass away. We finally closed the room after much insistence from the staff. If you entered the room alone, you could feel a cold breeze brushing against your skin, sending shivers down your spine. One of my fellow nurses had the ability to see ghosts, and she would often freak out while on duty. I couldn't understand why she chose this profession, knowing that people die in hospitals on a daily basis. One day, we were performing CPR on a patient during a code blue. I was focused on the chest compressions, but I noticed that she was just standing there, staring at the door. Later, I asked her why she didn't help, knowing it was a critical situation. She told me that she had seen the patient's ghost caressing their significant other as they cried. She later shared this information with the grieving family. Working in that hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were never truly alone. The presence of the deceased seemed to linger in the halls, watching us as we went about our duties. The locked room and the terminally ill patient's room were just 2 examples of the many unexplained occurrences that plagued the hospital. I had just started my shift at the Philippine General Hospital's burn unit when I received a disturbing report. 3 patients, a 4-year-old boy, a 42-year-old male, and a 46-year-old female, had been referred to the psychiatric ward for hallucinations. Curious about the nature of their visions, I decided to investigate further. As I entered the burn unit, an eerie silence greeted me. The patients lay in their beds, their eyes wide with fear, darting around the room as if searching for something. I approached the first patient, the young boy, and gently asked him what he had seen. With a trembling voice, he described a boy crawling on the walls of the ward, his limbs twisted and his skin charred. The boy's eyes, he said, were filled with pain and despair. I moved on to the next patient, the 42-year-old male. To my surprise, he recounted the same vision. A boy crawling on the walls, his appearance matching the child's description perfectly. The female patient too had seen the same apparition. It was as if they had all witnessed the shared nightmare, a terrifying reality that had infiltrated their minds. As I delved deeper into the hospital's records, I discovered that this was not the first time such incidents had occurred. In 2013 and on other occasions, patients had reported similar experiences. The same crawling boy, the same haunting description. It seemed that the burn unit was plagued by a malevolent presence, a spirit that refused to rest. PGH, I learned, had a long and dark history. The hospital had opened its doors on the public on September 1st, 1910. And since then, countless tales of paranormal activity had circulated within its walls. The ghosts of patients, nurses, and interns were said to make their rounds, their tortured souls forever trapped in the hospital's corridors. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, lurking in the shadows. The air grew heavy with an unseen presence, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I began to wonder if the crawling boy was more than just a hallucination, if he was a manifestation of the hospital's dark past, a reminder of the suffering that had taken place within these walls. I decided to stay with the patients, offering them what comfort I could. But as the hours ticked by, I found myself growing increasingly uneasy. The atmosphere in the burn unit has shifted, becoming oppressive and suffocating. I could almost feel the weight of the hospital's history bearing down upon us, the spirits of the past clinging to the present. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a sound that chilled me to the bone. A faint scratching noise like something crawling across the floor. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, in the corner of the room, I saw him. The crawling boy, his charred skin glistening in the dim light, his eyes fixed upon me with a haunting intensity. And so ends our night shift of supernatural encounters in Filipino hospitals. These stories remind us that sometimes the thin line between life and death isn't so clear after all. We're curious about your experiences. Have you ever worked the graveyard shift in the hospital? Did you encounter anything you couldn't explain? For those who visited loved ones in hospitals, did you ever feel like you weren't alone in those quiet corridors? Which of these 5 stories made you most grateful to be safely at home? If these hospital horror stories kept you awake, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. There are more unexplained encounters waiting in the wings. This has been Midnight Archives. Take care, and maybe think twice before looking down that empty hospital hallway. Good night.